Alright guys, so in this video we're going to be taking a look at the future NFL stadium renovations of 2023 and beyond. Which stadiums are getting renovated, which stadiums need to be renovated, and what's going on right now with the current stadium crisis when we look at teams like the Commanders, the Cleveland Browns, and whatnot. Of course, we've got the two new NFL stadiums coming up in 2026 with Buffalo and Tennessee. But let's get right into it, starting with AT&T Stadium and the Dallas Cowboys investing just under $300 million in renovations as they prepare to host the 2026 World Cup. One of the stated goals of the redevelopment is the 11,000 square foot big screen that dominates the area above the playing field. Jerry Jones believes that the image quality can be improved, as well as renovating the look of the stadium. Apparently, the overall stadium look will not change very much. This is mainly interior improvements like better suites, restaurants, things like that. The one big thing that might happen would possibly be the big scoreboard. So we'll have to see if that happens there. But I've said for a while now, I really think at this point, AT&T Stadium is probably underrated by a lot of people due to the polarization of the Dallas Cowboys. A lot of people just are annoyed with the Cowboys and they hate the stadium, but it is a really good stadium. It was the first super stadium in the NFL, and it is due for a significant renovation. It is kind of crazy, the idea of a stadium getting a $300 million renovation and it's really not changing much of the look. Like, 6 or 7 years ago, if a stadium got a $300 million renovation, you're talking about new seating, you're talking about removing seating, replacing it, doing stuff like that. But now, with how bad inflation is, it doesn't even break into it, and this is just more to get it ready, do like a little dress rehearsal for the World Cup that's coming in 2026. We have the Pittsburgh Steelers renovating their stadium. This was an article from February. They are improving the bathrooms. Apparently, that is the one major renovation. A total of 12 restrooms around the stadium are getting upgrades, and they're putting in new urinals with dividers. So that is a big thing coming to Pittsburgh. We've also got the NFL approving an $100 million loan for Empower Field at Mile High Stadium. And it says the project is slated to begin after this season and completed before the start of 2023. So this project is happening over the summer. It's going to upgrade video boards, premier hospitality areas, technology, concessions, and the Broncos team store, along with possibly new elevators. The Broncos say the video board enhancements are the most enticing of all of the anticipated projects. The south end zone scoreboard will expand by 70%. So there's a big investment by the Denver Broncos, and the new scoreboard will be the fourth largest in the league, which is kind of interesting that the Broncos are investing this much into the stadium, considering there's been murmurs that the Denver Broncos might want a new stadium. Empower Field at Mile High isn't highly regarded. I've got it right now kind of as a mid-tier NFL stadium, but there are a lot of people that think it's possibly in the bottom third, which is a major hindrance considering Denver is such a massive city, especially recently. They've got a huge population, and you would think their owner is probably looking at Vegas, LA. They're seeing the roof design, the multi-purpose aspect of it. Is that something that Denver would want? With this money being dumped into this new scoreboard, this tells me they're at least staying at Empower Field at Mile High for probably a minimum of 6 or 7 more years. I think the lease is up right around 2030, so we'll have to see what happens there. But the Denver Broncos getting improvements. And then we do have the Jacksonville Jaguars situation. So it says, Jaguars ownership to Jacksonville, renovate our stadium. That coming right after the season in January. Jacksonville elected officials are now on the clock as Jaguars owner Shad Khan's lease with the city to use the stadium ends in 2029. So yeah, TIIA, or what is it, TIAA Bank Field, it's a complete joke. Jaguars fans know it. It's basically a very similar version of Highmark Stadium in Buffalo. When you look at it, it's really at this point not, in terms of size, an NFL stadium. It's very small. And I know there was actually some interesting imagery about the Jaguars possibly trying to renovate TIAA Bank Field. If they actually decided to renovate it, it would cost, I would say, at least $700 million. Maybe they could do it in $500 million. But at this point, based on looking at the stadium, I would say they're better off just building a new one. I know that's easier said than done. You got to find the place. Where do you build it? How do you get the land? How do you raise the money? But when it comes to like putting a roof on TIAA, there's so many like infrastructure problems with it. It's just so small. Like, I don't see the point in dumping a ton of money into TIAA Bank Field. You just rather bite the bullet, spend a little bit more money, build a better stadium. I mean, Jacksonville certainly is not going to build a super stadium, but you could build something similar to what Buffalo or Tennessee is putting up in 2026 with a possible retractable roof. You guys can see the earlier renderings. This was back when it was called Everbank Field, so this was a while ago. It's been I wish it was still called Everbank because it's annoying to call it what it is now, but you can see it's got kind of a nice little retractable roof look there, and yeah, those are not even, I'm guessing those were done by fans. Those seem rather simplistic. It seems like they just kind of used some sort of Photoshop on the bottom one there to make it looks like that's a soccer design type roof. I see that roof with soccer stadiums a lot. So this is something with Jacksonville. The article later says that the Jaguars owner and management want some sort of roof over the Jaguars stadium to protect customers from the hot Florida sun in the early parts of the season and inclement weather. How much will the roof cost? Maybe $375 million, maybe more. Normally, if you want to install a new retractable roof, that is normally $500 million. So I'm not sure where they're getting $375 million. Maybe they got a different report, but from what I know, it costs about $500 million if you want to start from scratch, which is basically what they'd be doing. And I don't see much of a point. TIAA Bank Field is, you're better off just building a new stadium. And because think about like the new stadium, well, you know what? Maybe they won't have the money. I mean, some of these new stadiums are costing like $1.5 billion at this point. Jacksonville's kind of in a weird spot where they were a team that people were actually saying when they were terrible and they had like Blake Bortles and stuff that they should move to London because they were like the poster child for London. But now that they've got Trevor Lawrence, it's typically how it works. Like if a team becomes better and gets some life into their, overall roster, people stop clamoring that they should move, and their attendance, I believe, has gotten better. It got so bad in like 2015, 2016, they would tarp off sections of their upper deck, and they already have a really small stadium. So we're going to have to see what Jacksonville is going to do by 2029. This stadium is one of the most out-of-date stadiums in the NFL. I rated it as the second worst stadium behind FedEx Field, so we'll see. And then we do have the Cleveland Browns committed to renovating First Energy Stadium. So this was a big story that just came out a little less than a month ago. There was a lot of speculation that Jimmy Haslam wanted a new stadium, First Energy Stadium. I don't think it's horrible, but it's very bland and it's in a horrible spot. It's right on the lake, but there's absolutely no development of the land right next to the lake. So now the Browns, you guys can see some images of the potential redevelopment of the lakefront right next to the stadium. The Browns are in a spot, and Haslam came out and actually said they didn't want a roof, which is shocking considering it seems like that's the route he was going to go because he wanted Cleveland to maybe host a Super Bowl, host a Final Four, things like that. Maybe not. Maybe they're staying at First Energy. I certainly would not take this for gospel. This thing can change in a month if they get some sort of funds or whatever. They get a place they want to put it. But right now, it kind of seems like the Browns might want to just renovate First Energy Stadium, rather than get a new stadium. And then we do have the basically $500 million Superdome renovation that is happening. You can see this article back in September of 2022. Taking a look at some of the images of the Superdome, it is a multi-year renovation that's scheduled to be completed, I believe, by 2024. And they're installing a full new graphics package, a new scoreboard ring around the entire stadium. Really, really nice. I would have loved to have seen some type of window I know it's impractical, I know. Because like the way it's designed, there's really no way you can put a window on it. It is the only stadium in the NFL that has no natural light let into it, so it's fully enclosed. I know a lot of people think Ford Field is as well. That's actually false. Ford Field has a slit that you can see outside. It's actually open if you actually look at the roof of it. But yeah, so this will be interesting. I like the Superdome. It's very unique. I like the ring of seating around it. It's got a huge upper deck. It hosts so many big events, and it's hosting another Super Bowl, which I'm very happy about. I like the Caesars Superdome. I rated it as like a top 10 or top 12 stadium in the NFL, even though it is a fully enclosed dome. That actually, at this point, makes it unique. And you can just see they actually do have renderings of what's going to be happening for the Superdome over the coming years. The improvements they're putting up. Looks like some new social spaces. They're taking out seats, putting them in there. That's not surprising. That normally happens. And they've also got some infrastructure things as well. When it comes to just the overall outlook on the NFL stadiums right now, when it comes to renovations, the teams that I'm going to give a code red to, obviously FedEx Field. The situation with them is it's horrible. It's very similar to the Oakland A's, where they're playing in the worst facility in the league. They can't really do anything about it. There's no sense in renovating FedEx Field at this point. You know you're just going to get a new stadium. Why would you dump money into renovating a place you're going to leave in 5 years? But the Commanders still have to deal with the ownership problem of selling their team and then finally finding a place to get their new stadium ready to go. You're looking at their new stadium, possibly the next super stadium in the NFL, opening in 2028 or 2029 at the earliest, unless they can fast track the sale of the team. That I'm thinking the Commanders might get the next super stadium, because the Bills, the one that the Bills are building, is not a super stadium. It's nice, but it's certainly not a super stadium. And then Tennessee certainly isn't a super stadium either. So that's kind of what's going on. We'll see what happens with the Commanders. I'm guessing they're getting a new stadium eventually. And then the other team I would say is code red at this point. It is the Jaguars. They've got to do something, whether it's renovating TIAA, whether it's finding the funds for a new stadium. They do not have a good situation right now with how that is looking. Again, they have a stadium very similar to Highmark Stadium in Buffalo, and Buffalo is already scheduled to leave that starting in 2026. Their new stadium is breaking ground very soon, and it will be opened by them. But when it comes to the renovations, what's new next year when you're watching the games, really, I would say basically nothing, unless we get more word about renovations. I mean, the Superdome might look a little bit different if they do put that video board up all the way around it. And then the other thing that I would say, Empower Field at Mile High, possibly getting a new scoreboard, a bigger scoreboard, that might change it. But it should be a relatively quiet offseason when it comes to renovations in the NFL. But guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description. I'm, of course, the Depressed Ginger. Thank you for watching.